My intermission guest here on Concert Night this evening is Norman Krieger, one of my dearest and oldest, not in years, but in how long we've been working together, friends in the music business. We've played together many, many times, and we just heard his performance from the archives of Leonard Bernstein's The Age of Anxiety. And Norman, I guess we're living in an age of anxiety. So
indeed, it's great to see you. Great to see you and visit with you, Neal, again. And it's funny, this piece, which was considered, I guess, a period piece, seems to be very much a continual symbolic metaphor for the current state of humanity.
Yes, it isn't a period piece, it's an ellipsis piece that just keeps on.
I agree.
Keeps on going.
Exactly.
So Norman, you and I go back a long time. When we first worked together, we both had a fair amount of hair up on top now,
right.
And neither
now
of
we
us.
make it up for here. Yeah.
Well, I'm not even doing that. I think my beard is still hopelessly scruffy at best. But
yeah, I remember it was 1984 or 83. I can't remember. We played Mozart 467, I think, in Portland, if I'm not mistaken.
That would have been 83.
Beginning of an incredible friendship and collaborative relationship. I think I've probably worked with you more than almost any other conductor that I've known.
I think so, but it has been a few years, so we'll have to fix that soon.
Yeah.
So I know from looking every once in a while on Facebook, from things that you've posted, that you have been doing some concertizing recently. So you are no longer in a bubble, or you're in a bigger bubble than you were for the last 2 years. So how has it been reemerging from the lockdown shutdown era into returning to do recitals and
well, I'm just so grateful to play and to see people in audiences. I mean, this is funny. We're in the beginning of this year, I flew out to LA to play with my colleagues in the LA Philharmonic on their chamber series. And we were, I got there early, 4 days. We were doing Brahms Clarinet Trio, and we had 4 wonderful rehearsals. And then, of course, the day of the performance, the clarinetist's son tested positive for COVID. No. So that meant that Bert Hara, who's an incredible clarinetist, he couldn't play with us. So we almost canceled the concert, but fortunately on the same program was the Contrast by Bela Bartok, and so that clarinetist filled in on a 1-hour rehearsal right before the concert
to do the Brahms.
And we played, and since then I've played, 3 recitals, full recitals, and I just flew back last week from Orange County. I was scheduled to play the Mozart K491 C minor concerto, and it was one of those concerts with Carl St. Clair and the Pacific Symphony, where we'd have a 10 o'clock rehearsal on a Sunday and then a concert at 3 p.m. In a beautiful hall at Soka University. So I arrived there Sunday morning, and I'm greeted by the orchestra manager, who's very nice, and she said, "Norman, I need to talk to you." I said, "Oh, okay, what is it?" I thought something with the piano or something. She said, "No, Carl has COVID, so he's not going to conduct today." And I said, "Oh dear, so am I doing it from the keyboard?" I mean, what? She said, "No, we have an assistant conductor, and he's on his way here right now." And so, great opportunity for the assistant conductor, and he did a wonderful job.
So what's his name? We should know.
Jake Sarietta.
Jake Sarietta.
And and so he conducted, I think it was Haydn Symphony number 44, if I remember correctly, and then the C minor concerto is one of these concerts with no intermission, and which is kind of nice, actually, these 1-hour concerts. They are. People at 3 p.m, so I was able to go out and have dinner with my cousins, and then hop on a plane and come back to Bloomington that night. But still, just to be able to make music in person it's kind of like a mini renaissance for me, because for 2 years, I think my wife and I exhausted just about the whole library of Netflix and what's it called, Disney Plus, and I mean, we watched so many series, and that was kind of cool because I never watched TV and I never watched anything really on the tube, except some sports events, once a year, twice a year. And so I really, I'm just dumbfounded by the British school of acting because, the artistry, the level, the elect level of acting, which I think all musicians should study at some point, because then you really learn how to project gestures and meaning in music in a very different kind of way. And of course, timing, is so powerful. But then, of course, I was always practicing during the pandemic, and I was learning new music. I'm learning Nights in the Gardens of Spain by Defaya now, which I'm playing next year for the first time. Really beautiful piece. Have you done that work?
I've never done it, but I've covered it many years ago. I think with the Oregon Symphony, or maybe it was Milwaukee with Alicia De La Rocha, which is,
oh my gosh, yeah.
If you're going to hear that piece played by anyone,
Hear by the
one you want to hear it from.
Hearing it by, with royalty, that's for sure. Yeah, but it's something I've always loved. I grew up hearing Rubinstein play it when I was very, very young, and of course he was a mentor to De La Rocha. Hard to believe, this whole chain of events, but anyway. And so, now I'm working on the Choral Fantasy, and I'm getting ready for Mozart 414 this summer, and a whole series of Brahms concerts of chamber music, violin sonatas, the horn trio. I'm scheduled to record the horn trio with Noah Bendix Begley, the concertmaster of Berlin, and Stefan Zerninski, he just retired, one of the horn players from Berlin. We're supposed to do that in August. Hopefully that will work out. I have no idea where we're going to record it. We still haven't decided. So, I have these wonderful projects, and teaching, of course, keeps me busy. I'm chair of the piano department here at Indiana University Jacobs School of Music, and have incredible class of students that just inspire me and are really, they're so gifted and they're so smart.
Let's talk a little bit about Leonard Bernstein's Age of Anxiety, which he called, I believe, if I recall correctly, his Symphony number 2.
Yes.
But it has this pianist who's sitting there in front of the orchestra and has this major solo piano part. Perhaps from a pianistic standpoint, the biggest understatement of an endings, because you sit there and the orchestra finishes without you. Tell me a little bit about your history with the piece, and what the piece meant to you in the past, and maybe if you've played it recently, what you think about it now.
I always felt a very strong affinity for the work, because when I was a student at Juilliard, I used to go over across the street to the New York Philharmonic. And, even though Bernstein had already left as music director, he was still guest conducting pretty frequently. And so I'd go to his rehearsals, and he would come to Juilliard and conduct the Juilliard Orchestra, and I'd sit in there and just listening and learning. And, of course, his personality was larger than life. His persona was larger than life, but most importantly is his energy. There was a funny thing that happened. I think it was a Wednesday morning Juilliard Orchestra rehearsal that he was supposed to come in at 10 o'clock, and he didn't arrive until about 10:35. We were all waiting there, and he walks in with his sunglasses and cigarette in another hand, and he gets on the podium. He says, "I'm so sorry. I have the worst hangover I've ever had." And the whole orchestra just started applauding, go, "Yeah, he's one of us. All right, cool." And then he says, "All right, now we're doing the Chavez, was it Symphony Indigo?
Symphony India.
Then Symphony India." And he says, "Okay, let's go." And then all of a sudden, it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He had all this energy, and he was like, boom, boom, boom. Was getting the percussion moving, and the brass and the strings, and everybody was just, like espresso land. I mean, everybody was charged in the orchestra, and it was a completely different person that just walked in the room. So seeing that, and then, attending many of his concerts and actually meeting him backstage, it affected me. And also, New York, when I hear that music, I hear a lot of what New York, Boston must have been like, in the 1940s, what America must have been like in that time in history. And what I find so interesting, because Bernstein was so open about his journey, his musical journey, between studying with Nadia Boulanger and, his friendship with Copland and his studies at Curtis with Reiner, and his fascination with new music and his contribution, of course, as a composer to the world. I in the first part of The Mask, it's really almost autobiographical to me personally, even though it's based on the Auden poem, Age of Anxiety. The opening, I actually have written in my score for the first theme, the piano comes in, I write Bartok. Then the next theme, I think I write Lenny, because and then I write I think in one of the variations I write Schoenberg. It's very sort of 12-tone marked, and then Stravinsky. It's like, you can hear the influence of all these contemporary composers for him, in a sense. Maybe Schoenberg was much earlier, but still, I hear a lot of subconscious, perhaps, influences in that first part of the Mask. The second part, or the big second section, is I don't know. It's really larger than life, and the orchestration is such where you're sitting there, and you feel like, my God, you're in the middle of this cataclysmic sonic event in outer space, because of the dissonances of the brass and the strings and the winds. And then, of course, there's sort of a slow recitative piano section that almost has a Brahmsian feel to it. There's kind of hemiolas here and there, and then it becomes sort of Barber-esque, Sam Barber. I mean, you get these clusters of piano sounds that you hear in Barber's piano sonata, and of course his piano concerto. And then finally we end up in The Mask, which is basically all Lenny. I mean, it's like you're in a jazz club, and
Jazz City.
He's in his element, and it's just so extraordinarily written, with the percussion and the piano writing, which sounds really, it is very difficult because you're geographically all over the keyboard very quickly. I mean, it's hard, but you practice it enough, and then you get into the swing, and this da da dee dee da dee da dee da da dum dee da da dum da dee da. It's so typical Bernstein.
Great Lenny melody.
Yeah,
So,
and
I wanted to ask you specifically about the Mask movement, because as I recall, because that's a movement that's for piano and percussion, and the rest of the orchestra is silent. And it's my recollection, didn't you, for our performances, didn't you have us bring like the stand-up bass player and maybe even drum set player right down in front? So you were like a little jazz combo there.
Exactly. Yeah,
that was your idea, wasn't it?
It was. The reason I asked for that is because I had played it a number of times in very large halls. And, it's that typical situation where you go and you hear.
And there's a delay. Yeah.
And so I said I think it was David Lockington, who's, a friend. I said, David, is there any way we can it's a big stage. This is in Long Island, I think. Let's put them in front so I can hear. And then when the drum set is right there, you just can't go wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't even have, forgive me, but I don't even have to look at you. I can just hear. And then we're together, but otherwise it's kind of a guessing game. if the percussion is all the way, unless it's a super dry hall and you can hear, everything. But in most cases, that's not, you have some reverb, and it can be pretty iffy. And you just, if you're half a second off in that thing, you're lost.
It's interesting that I jumped in on that proposal right away. Actually, I think when we did it together, that was the very first time that I was conducting the piece. But many years ago, I had gone to San Francisco for a week to cover a concert when their assistant was unavailable. And it was a week that Lucas Foss was conducting a rather interesting and wide-ranging music program that was all American music, some of his, some of other people's. And one of the things on the program by itself was the Mask movement from Age of Anxiety, with Lucas playing at the piano and conducting. And
conducting.
So no conductor, just him at the front and the percussion in the back. And as the cover conductor, Lucas would come to me and ask me things, and he was having the hardest time because of the distance. Right. And he was a little erratic with his rhythm as he was playing. And I remember we actually did a session after one of the rehearsals in his dressing room where, I was a little embarrassed, but he was very appreciative. It's like, no, here you're rushing a little bit. And, because he was all nervous because of the distance issues.
That's impossible. I don't see how anyone could do that.
So having seen that when Lucas was doing that concert and you said, hey, let's bring them down in front, it was like, yes, that's the solution to all the problems. And I really, I was just a traffic cop there, keeping things together for the people who were far away. But the basic core of the piece, as you say, played like a little combo, and it worked.
Well, it's funny because Lucas is recording with Bernstein. I think it's the Israel Philharmonic. That's sort of the gold standard of that piece. But of course, Lenny was conducting. I don't see how you could do that. That's kind of crazy.
Yes, it was kind of a suicide mission that he embarked on in that. The rest of the concert went very well, and that, as I recall, that turned out okay in the performance. But he was,
the only thing is, how do you end the Mask? Because it was da 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 da, and it fades away, and you get the pianino playing the
from off stage. Honestly, I don't remember how they ended it, but it ended, and everybody was safe at the end. So
good. Yeah, it's a unique score. It's such a psychological piece. Sure, you read the poem, and it's very much connected to that in terms of the literary organization of it. But in many ways, it's it has that influence, I think, of what you get when you hear a great Mahler symphony. It's this big question mark. Why are we here? What is this all about? What is the purpose of this life? And so with the piano ending the way it does, Bernstein describes it because he rewrote the ending. Originally, I don't think there was any piano involvement with the ending. No chord at the end. And so he says that the whole ending is like what did he say? Observing with detachment what had just happened. It sounds very sort of Freudian, this kind of psychological analysis of your life, where you sort of would non-judgmentally look back and assess what happened. And I think that's sort of kind of what happened. It's just that hymn at the end is so beautiful and so profound. It reminds me a little bit of what Copland does in the Third Symphony at the end. It's loud, that's for sure, but it's also kind of like a hymn. You have this Americana, the best part of that middle part of the 20th century of composition in America, which is so interesting. And I guess when you really start to hear, after Gershwin and after, of course, all the Broadway composers and Ives, Bernstein sort of, finds his voice really as a major player among his fellow composers.
Yes.
I only wish he would have composed more. He conducted so much, and I think he regretted not composing more because he really had a unique way of expressing music. There are many short pieces that he wrote. There's a piece called Touches, which is a theme and variations, which is really cool. And the fact that he was a pianist, I mean, a really good pianist, helps a lot. I mean, a lot of the challenging sections in the piece, you can just tell this was written by someone that understands the physiology of the hand in relation to the keyboard. But what a miraculous opening that piece is with the clarinets.
Yes,
I mean,
really
every time I hear it, I feel myself like in that painting of the restaurant at the bar.
Nighthawks.
Yeah. And I can just see myself sitting there, like, I'm so sorry, but I've got the worst hangover. Sorry.
Yeah, but I find it's interesting, especially listening to a performance like ours from several years ago. I remember when we did it that I read the poem and I read the program notes and I worked very hard to sort of get in that the intellectual stuff that Bernstein put around the piece. And I find that a little bit like his Serenade for violin and strings and percussion, which was inspired by Plato's Symposium, it's a little bit like he puts so much external baggage on the music that if you just listen to the music, it tells you everything you need to know. You don't really, all due respect to Mr. Auden, you don't really need to read the poem. You don't really need to read the program notes. The music expresses the emotional content just perfectly. And the rest is just, I'm Lenny, I went to Harvard and I read those books and this is what I know. But I'm Neal, I went to Yale, so I have to diss Harvard a little bit.
Well, it's funny because I will tell you a story. I won't say who it is, just out of respect, but there was a time when I played this piece and a gentleman came back to me and he said that he knew Bernstein. And he said, you know that Lenny composed this first, and then he discovered the poem. And he said, I don't know if this is true.
Right.
But I was kind of shocked when I heard this, because, I sort of like everyone worshiped Bernstein, it's such a powerful figure in our youth and still is today. But, when I heard that, I thought, first I got really pissed. And then my attitude was, you know what? Well, okay. Well, this is a spiritual thing we're in with this music world. So maybe the seed was planted somewhere in the past and it ended up in the present and applies to the future, so what difference does it make? And
the other thing about Bernstein, as you mentioned earlier, is that he is always himself,
right.
But he's also the sum of his various influences.
Absolutely.
And many of those influences, I think, were the pieces of music that he was conducting.
Yeah.
And because he found it very difficult to separate the two parts or those two parts of his professional life. And I'm sure that if he's been, conducting for 8 weeks, concert, then he sits down for a few hours to try to compose. You can't possibly push all of that music out of your head and have it just be your music. And that was, I think, a battle he fought for a very long time. And then I think ultimately at some point he just stopped fighting. And it's just like, hey, this is me. This is my music. I'm the sum of all of these things that I know. And some of what I know is Auden and some of what I know is Plato. And if it fits into what I feel like writing, so much the better.
I think you're absolutely right. I have always thought of Bernstein as a theater composer, meaning like Mozart is a theater composer, theatrical.
Yes.
Even the Mozart concerti are, to me, are operatic.
A sense of drama in the music.
Exactly. And so that's one of the things I've always been drawn to. about music is that it's the 360 of the human condition. And I think Bernstein was one of those performers and artists, creators that wasn't afraid to reveal everything, you know. But I think that's why most people loved him, because he didn't care really. And even though people say that he did, but I think as a performer, he didn't have any other choice. It was just his energy, his passion, his raison d'etre, you know, it was just that he had to do it this way. And
there's a famous picture of Bernstein conducting fairly late in his life, and he's like,
right.
And he's like, it's all out there. And I have no idea what piece he was conducting, but I love that picture because that's who he was. It was like,
exactly.
I'm completely open.
Right.
This is me. If you like it, good. If you don't,
I don't care. Right. Yeah. I remember Michael Tilson Thomas telling the story of that when Bernstein was ailing and it was really in bad shape towards the end of his life. Bernstein said, you know, I'm at the pinnacle, the zenith of my decline. And that's so Bernstein, you know, like who would say, you know, the only thing that reminds me of that is Rubinstein as he was, you know, dying. He says, well, you know, I don't think I've ever gone through this again. I might as well enjoy it, you know, because I don't know what to expect. You know, it's a very sort of philosophical approach, I guess you could say, to life. Yeah.
Norman, it's been a pleasure talking to you and reminiscing about Bernstein and the Age of Anxiety and other things. I will maybe leave you with as a last question, something that I have asked several of the people who I've interviewed who have not been in Dayton in a while. And that is, the next time we can arrange to bring you as a soloist, what do you want to play? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Mozart.
Mozart. Okay. Well, let's see. Are there 27 concertos?
Any of them.
Any of them. Okay.
Happy to do anything.
Maybe I'll go to the computer and we'll run a random number generator between 1 and 27 and see what comes out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to me, as I age, to me, the two greatest orchestrators actually of piano concerti are Mozart and Ravel. I mean, those two guys, they mastered the, you know, coexistence of the keyboard and the orchestra in a way that I don't think even Beethoven or Rachmaninoff or none of those. It's a problematic form, the concerto form, you know, and so, but somehow Mozart was able to weave winds, strings with the piano writing as Ravel did as well. You know, I mean, it's just the sounds that I hear on my left side from those two composers is unlike any other. Maybe Poulenc. Poulenc seemed to master it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is via Zoom, but let's shake on it, and instead of saying next year in Jerusalem like at Passover, let's say next time Mozart in Dayton.
All right, sounds good.
Norman Krieger, Dayton Philharmonic, Neal Gittleman will do it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Norman.